how much conviction do you have in certain themes and certain sectors? And if you have high conviction, just know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This conflict will end, things will open up again, and I think that's going to come sooner rather than later.
Do you feel like this could be just a relief rally and the bottom, even though it's hard to guess, like you said, maybe the situation could drag on a little bit more?
The best thing to do in these times is to stomach the volatility, stay invested in the market, dollar cost average down when you can, and then wait for the return to the market.
So there are a little bit of talk on that. So in your view, is that a risk at all that maybe this war will trigger some sort of Fed interest rate reverse or stagflation risk? Even if the war resolves, for yourself, do you see any possible Black Swan event or some sort of the biggest risk that maybe the market's not pricing in yet?
As we clear up this Iran situation, once that's cleared up, once the US withdraws, once the Strait of Hormuz opens up again, and I think that's imminent, I think all of the themes that I talked about and the overall market bounces back, and I think it's an excellent opportunity to get in.
Hello, Paul.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Yeah, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for making the time to come to our studio. You come this at a perfect time right now for the investor who seeks some information about the market. As we know that right now there's a war going on in Iran, and the situation is quite dire. The news changes every day. There's a lot of uncertainty. So right now, even though the market has been coming down daily, every day, but there's been, whenever positive news comes out, market do bounce. Like today we're talking. Just to share with everyone, today is April 1st, and the news is that Trump just announced that the US may withdraw the troop within 2 or 3 weeks, despite, not being able to open the Strait of Hormuz yet. So that's the current situation right now. We're in a high volatility market, Paul, and investor are not sure what to do. I hear that a lot of people are holding a lot of cash. Some people are still invested, but they're not sure if they should add more in. What's your thought on the market right now?
First, I would say in the United States, we have a thing called April Fool's Day. Let's just hope Trump is not making a joke here and that he actually does intend to end the conflict within the next 2 to 3 weeks, because that would be ideal. But, I think investors have to see through the noise. When you think about Donald Trump, and you think about his administration, the number one thing is he's a pro-growth president, all right? But he's also pro-America. And he's trying to reassert the U.S. in the Western Hemisphere and in the Middle East. And for a long time, we had a major adversary, which was Iran. And what we're finding out through this conflict is just how big of an adversary they were, not just to us, not just to Israel, but to their partners in the Middle East. I mean, I think one of the most shocking things is that after the US and Israel attacked them, they started to attack other Muslim countries and other Middle Eastern countries that you would think would have been their allies. But it just shows the character of that nation and how much trouble they were causing in the region. So when investors are taking a look at this situation, they should know one thing about Donald Trump. He doesn't want to be there for a long time, but he wants to get the job done. So he'll take the time to get the job done, and then we're going to get back to normal. We're going to pull out, and we're going to make a deal. Remember, Donald Trump is the big deal maker. And so he's going to look to make a deal with Iran or whoever is running Iran right now so that the Strait of Hormuz opens up. Energy needs get met again from our allies in Asia and in Europe. And you're just going to have to deal with the noise and the rhetoric and, how he sort of operates, because everything he's doing is trying to position the United States for a negotiation, whether that's him saying, all the nations that need the oil from the Strait of Hormuz must deal with it themselves. Like, if I interpret that the way I know what he means is he's trying to get NATO member countries to help him and get more involved because they haven't been involved with the mission in Iran, right? So that's his way of doing that. And then from an investment standpoint, I think the number one thing that you have to think about is how much conviction do you have in certain themes and certain sectors? And if you have high conviction, just know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This conflict will end. Things will open up again. And I think that's going to come sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And then you want to stay in the market if you have high conviction. Going to cash and trying to time when this thing's going to end, that's just a fool's errand. No one can ever time the bottom. No one can ever time the top. The best thing to do in these times is to stomach the volatility, stay invested in the market, dollar cost average down when you can, and then wait for the return to the market. And you could see, like you said, every time there's a bit of good news, what are people doing? They're getting back into the market.
Yes.
You don't want to try to time it too perfectly. So stomach the volatility, stay in the market, in those high conviction places that you think are, long-term growth opportunities. And I think there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. But let's talk about this rally a little bit. Assuming that it's not a President Trump April Fool's joke, which I hope not. Do you feel like this could be just a relief rally and the bottom, even though it's hard to guess, like you said, maybe the situation could drag on a little bit more because pulling out of Strait of Hormuz does not resolve the oil crisis situation yet. So maybe there could be more problem to the economy coming on later on, or inflation problem.
So we're not going to get supply up and running right away. So yes, do I think it's kind of a relief rally? I think anybody's looking for good news. What you know about this market is a lot of it's driven by algorithms, right? So like every little bit of news will drive an algorithm. So good news, thinking that, energy needs are going to be met in the future, or that there's some good news coming out of Washington that we're going to resolve this crisis, will drive the market pretty quickly. Again, I don't like to think about all that noise. What I like to think about is like, what do I have high conviction in for the long term? And am I positioned well for when the market returns? Because again, I do think the market's going to return. I just don't know on what day. So I wouldn't look at one move here or there because, a bad piece of news or rumor could come out tomorrow, or Iran can come out and say something like they're not willing to negotiate. And then all of a sudden the market goes back down. What I would say to you is look for value in growth names. And if you look at the market today versus where it was 3 weeks ago, you're getting a lot of good growth names in good sectors at a value price. And if you have high conviction that the long-term investment trend is still intact, like in AI, like in humanoid robotics, like in aerospace and defense, or in the globally systemically important banks, the largest financial institutions in the world, like we believe and have high conviction in those themes. That's something that you should just stick with, dollar cost average down what you can, and get through this sort of moment of time, this noise in the market. Because there's a lot happening and there's a lot changing, and you just have to see through that to the investment opportunity.
Okay, AI, robotics, and a lot of those themes you mentioned, we'll definitely go into details about.
Yeah.
But let's just want to bring you back to the little bit of short-term market a little bit more. So you do feel like, even though it's hard to guess where the bottom is and it's hard to guess what the situation will be, there's a lot of moving factors. But you do believe that we're nearing to the lower end from the higher end, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the initial shock of, us teaming up with Israel and attacking Iran, I think that was very shocking to investors, to the market, to the world, especially from a president that said that he didn't want to intervene around the world, that he wanted to keep the U.S. Interests in mind and like not, send troops and get involved where we didn't need to get involved, right? So I think that was a shock to everybody. But again, it is a short-term issue, and Trump does not want to be in elongated wars around the globe. So he says that we're going to be out of it in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I take him at his word. And I believe that they're working on a deal with Iran right now. So for the short term, there might be a little bit of a disruption. There might be market volatility, but I think you have to stomach that volatility. I think you can't try to get in and out of the market unless you're a day trader, unless you're like a professional trader that does that for a living. I think there's still great long-term investment ahead, and you just have to get through the noise. So from a short-term perspective, I don't really worry about it too much.
Okay.
The way that I try to look at short-term market movements is is AI still intact? Is there still large investment that's being there? Is there still development that needs to be made in data centers and in chips and in racks? Like all of that is still in play. It's not going away, and the investment's not stopping tomorrow. So I have high conviction that that's going to continue through any bit of the noise, and any downturn there, I'm interested in buying. Is humanoid robotics in the early stages? Yes. So in my opinion, all this noise did was decrease the valuations of some of those companies, get you into, allow you to invest in them at a better entry point. So from my perspective, that theme is still intact. It's long term. I'm happy to be in it. When you think about global defense, I mean, the U.S. is doubling its military budget over the next year. Okay, they were spending about $900 billion already, which was larger than any other nation. They're looking to increase that to about 1.5 trillion. Europe is now responsible for their own defense. So they are increasing their spend from 2% to 5% of the GDP for NATO member countries. Like that investment theme is still in place. So why would I want to try to get in and out of the market through what I would consider short-term volatility as we clear up this Iran situation? Once that's cleared up, once the U.S. withdraws, once the Strait of Hormuz opens up again, and I think that's imminent, the world's not going to let the Strait of Hormuz be closed for too long, for too much longer. So that's an imminent situation that we come to some kind of resolution. I think all of the themes that I talked about and the overall market bounces back, and I think it's an excellent opportunity to get in.
I'm excited to talk about AI with you and the defense theme, aero defense, like you mentioned. And I do believe it's still intact. And part of it, I think, the headlines on the war is actually stealing the development headline in those area too as well. There's a lot of development going on right now as we speak about AI and robotics, but the war headlines are taking all the attention away. So would definitely like to hear about development more from you. But maybe just one last question on the current situations that even if the war resolved, for yourself, do you see any possible Black Swan event or some sort of the biggest risk that maybe the market's not pricing in yet? Like for example, in the past 2 years, we believe that if we talk about Fed, we believe that Fed will, on a trend to lower interest over time.
Yeah.
But with the current situation, the oil price spikes up. There's been a fear about maybe the Fed need to reverse and raise interest rate again, which would be catastrophic for the market.
Yeah.
So there are a little bit of talk on that. So in your view, is that a risk at all that maybe this war will trigger some sort of Fed interest rate reverse or stagflation risk? And all that.
No, again, I think we have a situation with Jerome Powell where he's been kind of battered by Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's way of trying to get Jerome Powell to lower interest rates a little bit quicker than he has was to call him names, too late, Powell. He's got a nickname for him, and to really, to go after him, criminally, like he's being indicted for the renovation spend that he made on the Federal Reserve, and a lot of that is like, again, it's the way that Trump and his administration deals with things, and it creates a lot of noise, and then it also paralyzes a guy like Jerome Powell. I think what investors need to look at is what's next, and what's next is Warsh, and Kevin Warsh has written extensively about how he believes that lowering interest rates does not cause inflation. And I would tend to agree with him, because when you think about what causes inflation, it's money printing. We've got to stop money printing, and we've got to stop expanding the balance sheet. Like when we do that and we start putting money into the system, that's what really creates inflation. Inflation is not created by lower interest rates. Growth is created by lower interest rates. And so Warsh believes that you can lower interest rates and still keep inflation in check and allow growth to happen. So we're only a few months away from Warsh, taking over as the Fed chair. He's got a much different philosophy than Powell and from previous Fed chairman, and he's written about it. So what I would tell all your viewers to do is, like, don't take my word for it. Go and read what he's written in the past. His goal is to lower interest rates substantially, and I think he's going to get people on board to do that with him. And he believes that he could lower those interest rates without increasing inflation. And I would tend to agree with him. The other thing that I would tell you, read Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman says that interest rates don't really impact inflation. The only thing that impacts inflation is printing money.
Okay.
All right. And that's it. So as long as we don't print money and flood money into the system the way that we did during COVID, the way that we did during the financial crisis in 2008, we should be able to get inflation under control. When it comes to fuel, we just have to get through this. And once oil prices start to come down, I think what you're going to see is the price of oil, the price of gasoline will come, down pretty quickly. And then we don't have to worry about that anymore.
I see. And asking yourself, because you flew from the Strait, you're living in the States.
Yeah.
What about the economic situation on the ground that you see?
So people are annoyed. I will tell you, people are annoyed because one of the things about Trump was drill, baby, drill. We're going to be energy independent. Oil prices are going to come down. And again, when you think about inflation, okay, I think the story was communicated poorly in the United States. When Trump was running, he said, I'm going to get prices down. I'm going to get prices down. It's impossible to get prices down to where they were before 9% inflation, which is what we had under the Biden administration, right? What he really meant was, I'm going to get the inflation rate down. And he's done that pretty well. But a key point that he did communicate was that because we would get energy prices so much lower, your day-to-day cost of living will be much better, even if you're spending it, a little bit more for goods and services elsewhere. That was working really well. But now that oil prices are up, he can't really say that. And when oil prices go up, so I'll give you, for instance, I live in Connecticut in the United States. And prior to the war, gas prices were coming down substantially. You were paying about $2.50 a gallon. Once we attacked Iran and the Strait of Hormuz closed and crude oil prices went up, that price went from $2.60 a gallon to about $3.70 a gallon.
Almost doubled.
Very quick, not almost double, but very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And for the business owner that's driving around, or the mom that's going to pick up her kids every day and driving to the grocery store and doing all that stuff, that's a really substantial increase in your day-to-day spend. And so he's got to get that under control. He's very aware of it. And I think that's the reason why he wants to wrap this thing up in 2 to 3 weeks, because we have midterm elections that are coming up, in November, and he doesn't want to lose at the polls. So it's very, very important that we get this straightened out, that we get oil prices back down low, and that we get a growth mindset again.
Okay. But hearing from you, the price gone up, it does affect the people in the States. But in your view, you don't see that as a risk to the economy?
It's a huge risk. Okay. Well, it's a huge risk from a sentiment perspective because, again, I think a lot of the policies of this administration can work, and they can work really well if we could just get through the noise. Okay. And we've had a lot of noise from the very beginning. Last year was the tariff announcements and the tariff tantrum, and the market took a hit. Then we came roaring back. And then we attacked Venezuela and we had a little blip. And now we've attacked Iran and we've had a little blip. I think we need a little bit of smooth sailing for a little while, because I think even his strong supporters are starting to get a little bit tired of having to explain everything. You know what I mean? Okay. At the end of the day, I think we end up in a good spot, and I think we see strong growth for the remainder of 2026. Starting in the second half, but we got to get there first.
Okay. I like how you use the word blip, because to the market, trillions of dollars at stake, whenever the US have these blips, with the trade war, with the Venezuela and now Iran, like you said. Yeah. But as the time passed, it seems like Trump has all the answers for it, and has been making, improvement for the US economy and the market. Yeah. And that's why I want to ask you the next questions is that, can you help us understand Trump better on what he's going to do next? Because on his agenda, not only Iran, he's also now going to visit China. Yeah. He's also said that Cuba will be the next target for the States, and as well as he's trying to pressure Canada to become the 51st state and many more things. So a lot of stories around Trump after his midterm, still 2 more years, like you said. So help us understand him better, so we can position ourselves in the market better.
So he's a businessman, number one, and he loves to be involved in every part of the business, just like he is for the was for the Trump organization. So besides the fact that he's president of the United States, he's also head CEO of America. And you saw that, you saw that when he went to the Middle East. He brought all the CEOs. He's their number one salesperson. He's one of the, if you talk to people in New York real estate, that knew him, they'll say he's like the best salesperson that's ever existed. And so he's selling for the United States right now. So what Trump is trying to do when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Cuba, when it comes to Canada, is reassert American dominance. And he's going to do that and continue to do that. And he's also repositioning us with all of our trade partners so that we can, onshore manufacturing back to the United States, rebuild the middle class, and then be more prosperous. And so that's what all of this is about. And he uses the United States economic prowess as leverage in all of his discussions. And so what I think you're going to see, and that's one of the reasons why I think he knew that he had to do something with Iran, because once he can get Iran out of the picture, that opens up the Middle East. And there's lots of business opportunity in the Middle East for American companies, right? And there's lots of opportunities for Israel, a free Israel, if they could partner with the Middle East and work freely with the United States. And if you take what we're doing in like Venezuela, there are natural resources that we want there, and there's oil. And that oil is already being extracted from Venezuela, brought to Houston and Texas. And that's going to help us increase the oil supply. And it's going to allow him to make deals, providing energy to Europe and to Asia from Venezuela and not out of the Strait of Hormuz. When you think about why he's going to China, he wants to make a deal for our chip companies, specifically NVIDIA and AMD and some others, right? He doesn't like the fact that we can't sell into China right now and that there's all this stuff. So he's going to go make a deal. And I think that's going to open up the market for companies in the United States, but at better terms than it was in the past. If you think about China, for instance, right? I remember when I was a young person in this industry and I worked for a large insurance company in the United States, and we were trying to make a market in China. In order for us to do that, we had to partner with a Chinese company, give them 50% of the profits and all the IP. That didn't work out well for companies in the United States, and it allowed, a lot of our IP to be stolen by China, and then, we didn't get the benefit of that. So I think he just wants to reset all that. And I think that's actually going to be good for the United States. It'll be great for China. It'll be great for other Asian nations, South Korea, Thailand, because you're our allies. Yes. Right. And so I look forward to that trip. I was a little disappointed that it was postponed, but that's what he's doing. And when he again, I'll say this because it's very important. Trump always starts at the strongest, most extreme position. That's his negotiation style. And then he knows that he's going to have to come back somewhere in the middle. But generally speaking, once you get to that middle ground, it's good for everybody.
He always goes very extreme. So let me take you back to the day, the Liberation Day, when he brought out that big, whiteboard on the tax. So I guess you're not surprised at all because you knew that he's going to go
Always. And it's actually more shocking to me how people get nervous about it.
Okay.
It's very shocking to me that after all this time seeing him operate, that they still think that his most extreme position is where he's going to end up. Even right now, like I said, when he's talking about Europe and saying if you need oil from the Strait of Hormuz, you go get it. He doesn't really mean that. It's an extreme position. And what he's trying to do is motivate them, right? They're even talking about NATO now. We're going to have to reset NATO. Well, why is he doing that? Because he's trying to motivate NATO to do more in the region. So, and he knows that if he takes that stance, people will back down because the United States does have leverage. Now, as long as the United States has leverage, he'll be able to do that. And I think that's what you have to realize about him is he barks very, very loud in order to get your attention, and then he negotiates to a better place somewhere in the middle.
Perfect. That's a good playbook to understand Trump. But then now, let me ask you about the market then, because like you said, you're looking forward to the China trip as well as all these other negotiations that's going to happen. There'll be times when Trump, comes out demanding, very high stake or things like that again. And market will react. Yeah. Like you said, they'll panic. You're surprised they panic, but they've still been panicking every time. Yeah. We still have Trump for 2 more years, assuming the midterm election goes well. Yep. So any advice for the investor, especially in Thailand here, where we're so far away from news and and we're not so used to listening to Trump, speaking on a television as much. Which all we hear from him is just the tweet, the headline coming in the morning our time. So every time is quite a surprise for us. And so how do we position better apart from not being panic? And how can we leverage or make benefit from Trump being this playbook?
I think that when he disrupts a market, what you have to do is say to yourself, what I said earlier is, do I have high conviction in this marketplace? Is it a real opportunity? Have I done my due diligence? Have I done my homework?
Okay.
I'm going to give you a real basic example. NVIDIA. Look at NVIDIA earnings. NVIDIA earnings this last quarter were the very best earnings call in the history of all companies that have ever been recorded.
Yes.
And the stock sold off because of noise.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell that stock. And I think it's a massive opportunity. And I don't think anything that's happening around the globe
is changing that.
Is going to change that. So if you have high conviction in something like that, don't worry about the noise.
Okay.
Like, this is just noise. Now, if there was something fundamentally that changed, let's say the hyperscalers, like all the people that are spending CapEx in semiconductors and in AI, if they pulled back, that's a fundamental choice. Now you might want to take some risk off the table.
Okay.
But if all of those people are still spending all that CapEx, if NVIDIA is confident in its growth and projecting even higher earnings and higher revenues and more sales looking out into the future, to me, I think the opportunity is still in place and I think the investment is still sound. So if it sells off, it's like what Warren Buffett says. In the short term, right? It's a vote. The stock market is a voting machine.
Yes.
But in the long term, it's a weighing machine. Start weighing your positions. Don't worry about the people that are voting on it that don't really know what they're doing. Do your due diligence, do your homework, and figure out if this is a place that you want to be for the long term and how much conviction you have. If that's where you want to be, stick with it. That's what I would say to people. And don't worry about the noise. The noise provides opportunity if you have high conviction.